Tomorrow, President Biden is expected to announce a pathway to permanent legal status for hundreds of thousands of migrants who've been living in the U.S. for at least 10 years and are married to U.S. citizens. The plan reportedly would change existing laws, which would prevent illegal migrants from obtaining green cards. Meanwhile, the New York Post reports agencies in 49 states are providing voter registration forms to migrants without requiring any proof of citizenship. Migrants can access welfare benefits and even mail-in ballot voter registration forms, while 19 states and Washington, D.C. allow non-citizens to obtain driver's licenses. Joining me now is Oklahoma Congressman Kevin Hern. He's the chairman of the Republican Study Committee and a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, good morning.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
So this issue of election integrity once again rearing its head when it comes to these states and the fact that they're basically allowing migrants, if they wanted to vote in a federal election. We're looking at state laws versus federal law, and there seems to be a disconnect here. Your thoughts?
Well, many thoughts. First of all, it'll just show you that the Democrats will do anything to win an election, including having non-citizens vote. What we're seeing with Biden right now is basically Dreamers 2.0 from the Obama administration that he and President Obama did. That was an outrage for all Americans who especially the illegal immigrants that came here the right way, to see people get in front of them to be able to vote in elections. And this is exactly what everyone's been saying for years now. The Democrats, they don't really care about the people as themselves. They just need more voters so they can assure that these kind of policies to destroy America and put America last, not first, is what we'll see for the future.
Well, I think what the New York Post brings up, and I think this is fair to repeat here, if an applicant attests that they are a U.S. citizen, that is considered valid on its face, and the person is registered to vote. And that is why there is concern about election integrity, in particular because of these polling numbers for Joe Biden, and that the Democrats are realizing they've got a major issue. But let's talk about business here for a second, because President Biden recently vetoed a bipartisan bill that would have repealed a National Labor Relations Board rule that treats companies as joint employers of contract and franchise workers, and it forces them to bargain with those workers' unions. Now, Biden says the bill will harm collective bargaining for workers, while accusing the Republicans of, quote, siding with union-busting corporations. A little harsh. You recently wrote an op-ed for The Hill about this, and you call it Congress approved on something bipartisan, and Biden vetoed it. And one of the quotes I thought was interesting that you mentioned in the op-ed, you say it was a slap in the face to the franchise community and the more than 800,000 small businesses operating as a franchise. So you were a McDonald's franchisee owner at one point. So get into this and why this is so important.
Well, what's really sad about this is so many people like me that have grown up really struggling in life, grew up in a poor childhood, had an opportunity to get into the franchising world as I did 35 years ago. I spent 10 years going through the franchising program, saved $100,000 to get my first McDonald's restaurant in January of '97. Then spent the next 25 years growing that business to 24 restaurants, thousands of employees, people that got a start in life, that went on to become, do very well in business. And, to see the American dream. And my wife and I worked every day. It seemed like sometimes that the weeks had 8 days in them. And this president wants to destroy all that for the 800,000 franchise owners out there across America. Mm-hmm. The place where you're not in business by yourself, you're in business with a company that's created a system. You can control your employees, and what Joe Biden and the Democrats want to do, I'd say in this case, more importantly, Joe Biden and the administration want to destroy that. This was a bipartisan bill, House and Senate. In this day and age, to get a bipartisan bill where a Republican-led House and a Democrat-controlled Senate can put a bill together, then see the President of the United States, supposedly one who loves small businesses, destroy it for the sake of union organizers, is an atrocity. It's a slap in the face of what the American dream is all about.
Congressman, it's true, and small business is the driver, the economic driver of job growth in this country, and that's why we're seeing so many people take second and third jobs, because they're not making enough to make ends meet to make their rent. I want to ask you something else here about last week. So you were in the room when former President Trump was in Washington. And one of the things that we are hearing about his conversations with some of the top CEOs, Jamie Dimon and Brian Moynihan, when he was at the Business Roundtable, was he was really pushing his proposals, talking about ideas. One of the things he floated apparently was maybe taking the corporate tax rate down. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 15%. That was discussed. We know President Biden wants to do the opposite. And then the other thing is that it seemed to be promoting this business-friendly agenda. Did you hear those things coming from former President Trump when you were in the room with him? And can you share that with us?
Sure. Not only when I was in the room, but ever since he's become the president in 2016, we heard that. It's actually the reason I ran for Congress, that we actually had somebody that was in the White House that cared about business and cared about putting people to work and getting them off of government welfare. That it was so important in my life to get a hand up, but we can't keep giving handouts. I mean, right now what we have over 90 programs, over $1 trillion a year in the social safety net program, and we've done very little for the poverty in America. And so when President Trump talks about this being the greatest nation, the greatest place in the world to do business and create jobs and put Americans to work, that's what we need to be working on. I think also what you're seeing with these business leaders that have kind of shied away from President Trump over the last couple of years is they're seeing this two-tiered system of justice that Joe Biden and the Democrats have done and allowed, for instance, not the tapes to corroborate the transcript, that they're concerned now that anybody is fair game in the Biden administration's DOJ, and they want to change that direction. But President Trump, I will tell you this, it's hard to believe that on Friday he was 78 years old. With the energy he has, the places he's going, the thousands of people are coming to see him, than seeing Joe Biden, who is an 81-year-old, tired old man that doesn't know what's going on, as special counsel Robert Hern said, it is just a difference in night and day in the two leaders for the American people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that when it comes to policy, the actual things that would change, whether we have another term of Joe Biden or a second term of Donald Trump, when it comes down to the nuts and bolts and the dollars and cents of that, that's where we seem to see the polling tell us that Americans are looking at their wallets. They're looking at their economic situation, and they're telling the pollsters, that they're not happy. Final word.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, and your previous guest talked about what the current inflation is doing, but what people need to remember, why they're hurting so badly, is that the cost of everything is up some 20% since Joe Biden took office. We have a runaway border. We have an energy policy that puts our friends around the world dependent on other parts of the world for their natural gas and for their oil. And then we also have what we see right now in the economic policies, as you just described, that are just terrible. The foreign policies that we're seeing right now, chaos around the world. President Trump had no war started, and wars cost money and they cost lives. And so the American people are wanting to get back to where they were 4 years ago and put more money in their wallet so that they can live a better life.
Congressman Kevin Hern, thank you for being here. It's always great to speak with you.
Great to see you.
All right.